following, even if so far traditional polls have not confirmed that support. Joining me now, Texas Representative and Republican presidential hopeful Ron Paul. Mr. Paul, it's good to see you again, sir. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
Let's just start with the hot news of the day, the subprime mortgage problem, the stock market turmoil over it. What thoughts do you have if there was a President Paul? How would you be handling this, sir?
Well, first we should try to understand why it happened. Of course, many predicted this would happen with the low interest rates of the early part of this decade. Many people predicted it. Mortgage rates were artificially low. The overnight rates were artificially low. The Fed was inflating like crazy. So there's a lot of malinvestment. First it was in the NASDAQ bubble. Now it came in the housing bubble. So it was very predictable. So nobody should be surprised. And the bailout that's occurring now with the Federal Reserve buying mortgage security.
You believe the Fed is bailing out? That's we had Larry Lindsey on and some others before. You believe this is a bailout today?
Oh, I don't see how it could be anything else. Where did the Fed get this $120, $130 billion to buy bills and buy securities? They get it out of thin air. And this bails the banks out. The president is saying the right things, and he doesn't want to bail out, but the Fed's doing the bailout.
What would happen if the Fed stayed out today? Okay, fair. Your point of view is fair enough. Others have said it, and I appreciate the point of view. And the market, let's say stock market fell a couple thousand points. There were moments this week when we were looking at 500 points a day. What would your take be? Would a President Ron Paul want the Fed to be the backstop, the liquidity backer of last resort, or just completely hands off?
Well, if you want to get back to normalcy, you have to let the market liquidate the bad debt and the bad investments. But it's tough politically, and that's why we can expect the Fed always to inflate. Politicians will never allow the correction to come. And that's the fallacy. By bailing out and propping up, you just delay the inevitable. Sure, they may pull this out and the markets may do well Monday, but it won't stop it. It will come back again, and the correction will come until you liquidate all the bad debt. By propping it up, it doesn't help the situation long term. Short term is a good political answer.
Senator Clinton and other leading Democrats, both on the campaign trail and in the Congress in Washington, are talking about putting some more money, lots more money, several $1 billion into a so-called mortgage bailout. Your thought?
Well, it's just an additional bailout. They shouldn't have created this market in the first place, and I'm afraid it'll pass because people, feel like, oh, the poor people are losing their homes. Of course, they never ask the question, why did the people who didn't qualify get into the mortgage in the first place, and who made the quick profits on that? Somebody on Wall Street and somebody in the security business. Somebody else is holding the paper now, and they're going to lose it. But to come in and pretend you can prop that up by more money, where are they going to get the money? We don't have any money in Washington.
How much, we got to move on, how much would you cut government spending, federal spending? How much would you cut it, sir?
You mean the first year or after several years?
I'll give it to you either way.
Okay, ultimately, if you had a constitutional government, you're talking about cutting government 50 or 60 or 70% and getting rid of the income tax. But if you're talking about a reasonable approach, you have to change an attitude about government. We'd have to change our foreign policy, and we'd have to change our attitude about bailing out everybody and change our attitude about the welfare state.
Which departments would you knock down?
Oh, Department of Education. You know how Ronald Reagan used to talk. Education, Department of Energy. Actually, the Department of Homeland Security doesn't serve our purposes. So there's a lot that we could cut out. We literally could save tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars.
With your tough on spending philosophy, which would be a big favorite, I think, in many quarters on Wall Street, why are you taking $400 million worth of earmarks in this session of Congress?
Because, of course, I never vote for the earmarks. I always vote for the final passage of those bills. But I believe Congress has a responsibility to earmark their spending. Why should we just give it to the bureaucrats and make up their decision? So I don't vote against striking an earmark, and I ask for the earmarks for my district. But I think the process is flawed and the total spending is flawed. So I tinker with the bills as I have to adjust, for the amendments. But ultimately, I vote against the bills. The system is flawed.
I myself and many others believe, earmarks for cash, lobbyist cash, is the heart of the corruption in Washington. I'm not accusing you of corruption, sir. I'm just reporting $8 million for the marketing of American shrimp and a couple $2.3 million to pay for research into shrimp fishing. I mean, shouldn't we just abolish earmarks altogether?
But the whole thing is no, because then you turn the money. We would got to get rid of the system, not the earmarks. We got to get rid of the appropriations, and that's what I do. We shouldn't be in the business of divvying up the loot, sending it to Washington and doing it. Sure, it's imperfect, but to turn it over to the bureaucrats to pick and choose, then it's all done under the table. At least there's transparency now. A few months ago, there was no transparency. You didn't know where the earmarks were. Now that the transparency there is out there, I think this is much better. But ultimately, the only solution is getting rid of this system and not having these programs to begin with.
Last point. I read in the interesting New York Times magazine article about you. It was a pretty flattering article, I think, in general. You mentioned you were reading a book about Armageddon. Is that Financial Armageddon? We had the man on tonight, Mr. Michael Panzner. Is that his book?
You know, I can't recall because there are two books with that same name, and I do not recall the author.
Well,
but,
let me just
both
say,
of them have the same theory.
Let me just ask you, talking about Armageddon, are you an economic pessimist about the future of America?
No, I'm an optimist if we do the right things. If we restrain the Fed from creating money out of thin air and causing all the malinvestment and encouraging big government spending. See, we can't have the spending if we don't have the Fed to bail the politicians out by monetizing the debt.
All right. Mr. Ron Paul, we appreciate it very much, sir. All best on the campaign trail. By the way, speaking of the campaign trail, coming up on Monday's show, it's Your Money, Your Vote. Once again,